Hi, welcome to Bear Mountain. I'm out in the greenhouse today, seeding or getting ready to seed different flowers for our farm for that we usually typically do this time of year in January. There's some confusion a little bit about what week it is, and I'm a little behind, so I'm kind of working on week 3 and week 4, and this will be coming out on Sunday, the first of week 4. And the calendar and horticulture definition of week are two different things. The horticulture makes it for the first full week, and everything else is the first day will be the first week. And so it's a little confusing, but I'm also behind, so I am going to just kind of walk through the things that I'm getting started that I would typically do a week or so ago or a week from now. So we're sort of in that range. And the first thing that I'm going to be seeding is Delphinium. Now, I'm not going to walk through all the watching me set seed in each block. I'm just going to more talk about what variety and a little bit of the things that I have found that work really well for getting them to germinate really well. So a little backstory on the Delphinium. I ordered my Delphinium seed in the summer, 2021, in the summer, because our Delphinium sort of was on its third year. And even though it's a perennial, a lot of times the perennials kind of after the third year you need to get another round going. They've kind of given their all, and these are in a tunnel, and so they aren't out in the elements and can gather all the rain or whatever that possibly they need, or cooler temperatures or whatever. And so we noticed that we were getting a slight case of powdery mildew at the end of the bloom season for Delphinium. And so we kind of decided, well, maybe we should get a new batch rolling. And so I ordered more seed of the Guardian variety. And we just kind of let them exist. And we then cut it all down in it along with our snapdragons. And we kind of left that whole centered in our hoop house we let it go. We didn't water or anything like that. It was just kind of like it was kind of a spring tunnel, and we just kind of let it sit for a while. And when we got ready to start the snapdragons, to put in the ones that I had started in the snapdragons, we started the irrigation again. And we kind of told this story with the snapdragons. We started the irrigation again, and lo and behold, plants just started to reappear. They had gone dormant, and we thought they were dead and gone, but we awoke the soil biology by irrigating, and they came to life, and our snapdragons started to grow, and our Delphiniums started to grow. And I was like, oh, I have, a full 300 mini block tray of Guardian Snapdragon or Delphinium that I bought. And the seed was new, and it was kind of expensive. And I was like, well, what do we do with this? And so I kept watching the Delphinium thinking, is it going to really be a good producer for next year? or this year, 2022. And yeah, they filled in really nicely. It's taken a couple of freezes, and we need to cut it back down so it can regrow and do some really nice blooms. We even had a couple of them in November, December time period. But I did notice that I have a few holes where things didn't come back up. And so I decided, well, I'm going to take those delphinium seeds and get them germinated and get some plants and fill in those holes. And what I can't get into what's left, what's part of that row for delphinium, I'm just going to put them in our landscape and make our landscape really pretty. So I'm going to start with delphinium today. And what they need is they need a really cold start. And I can get that cold start by, I store my delphinium in the refrigerator. It's a little refrigerator that doesn't get opened very often. It's in a garage, and I just keep them in there all the time. And one of the requirements for delphinium is it needs to be refrigerated about a week before you start to plant them. And since I've already done that by just them being in there, I've done that first step. The second step for us, and I know there's 1,000 different paths to get to the same, spot. But for us, what has worked the best to get good germination with delphinium is that refrigeration and new seed. When I've tried to do older seed, a year or two older, it just doesn't work. I mean, I might get a few, but it's pretty disappointing. And when you go and look at seed viability, delphinium is usually listed as just 1 year. So I always get just what I need, and I only buy, and I have new seed each time. We use 3/4 mini blocks that I'm going to seed them. Here they are. And I have 3 colors, lavender, white, and blue. So I'll do runs of 100 on each of these. And they need tiny bit of covering, mostly just a kiss coat of vermiculite over them. This is the time for us. Actually, it can go even back to like week 50. Yeah, but I'm still within the zone of what will work. I am not knowing where you're located, those of you that are watching, it's usually 10 to 16 weeks before your last frost. So, back up 10 weeks or 16 weeks from your last frost, and that'll give you an idea when you need to start them. We germinate them at between 65 and 75 degrees. So these will go into the house. We have a plant stand that has lights on it. And because our house is usually pretty close to 68, 70 degrees continuously. It may be a hair warmer underneath the light, but that's my consistent spot. They need to be, they take about, 10 to 20 days to germinate. They're kind of on the slow. They're not as slow as Lisianthus, but they're kind of slow. I typically almost always get 15 days before I see the first little green guys coming up out of my block. I will seed them, cover them with just a smidge of vermiculite, and we will grow them with a humidity dome. And I usually never touch them until I see green. My humidity dome under these LED lights seems to hold just enough moisture that I don't have to touch them. And if I need to water them, I water them from the bottom. We almost all are watering, particularly in the house. We put these trays into a solid tray that we moisten with a capillary mat, which we've talked about this lots of times. Check back on our soil block videos. But I will water these from the bottom. And once they come out of the house, when they've showing their first true leaves and are starting to grow, I'll bump them up into a larger, either a larger block or into one of our plug trays, and they'll grow out here in the greenhouse where it's a little cooler and more natural, so that when it comes time to putting them in the ground, they've almost always been hardened off already. So that's, it's kind of a cool season flower. So growing on is out here in the greenhouse where it's cooler. We have heat mats here in the greenhouse. Not everything has a heat mat, but there are heat mats, and then there's a little heater tucked back in there that comes on, that we put on when we want to make sure the temperature stays at a certain rate. But mostly it's ambient temperature out here. So Delphiniums is going to be the first thing that I'm going to start. The next thing that I'm going to start is Dusty Miller. And Dusty Miller is a really big crop for us in terms of foliage. Once we've got an established row or half row of Dusty Miller, and it starts to get ready to be strong enough, in July or whatnot, it goes till frost when we stop it because we need to protect it. And the current one that we've been cutting on is 3 years old. So we've only done this, I seeded them 3 years ago, and it's time for me to start another row. We'll keep the row that we have going, but we'll cross over to the other side and start a new row, and then let that row that's been going for 3 years, die. Anyway, so Dusty Miller, we cut bunches off those every week. When it's just a flower or a foliage that florists just love, and particularly in weddings and summer, into fall, even if we can keep it going into early Christmas designs. It's just so popular. And to do Dusty Miller, we sow it 8 to 10 weeks before. That's the typical before the last frost. But for us, it's now. Actually, it was last week, and it takes somewhere between 7 and 10 days to germinate. And I look back at the records, and it's consistently 7 days. It germinates at 65 to 75 degrees, which again, the best place to do that is in the house. You don't cover it at all with anything because it needs light to germinate. And once it comes out here, if I wanted to hold it for a little bit when they've sprouted, I may sprinkle them with just a smidge of vermiculite just to make sure I have good moisture in the blocks. It too, once it gets up to the true leaves, it will get bumped up and grow on. it'll be here for a while, and then we'll go out down to our crate house where it really grows the longest point of time before going into the ground, because then it really mirrors the weather. It will go from the crate house in plugs to a hoop house in the ground. So the temperature, since nothing's heated, that's the most consistent, and it will be ready to roll in the hoop house. The next thing that I am going to start is Lisianthus, and everybody's been talking about Lisianthus, and we've been growing it for several years. We've had some really excellent years, and we've had some really bad years. Last year was really good, and the funny thing about it is I sort of looked at last year and said, I had old seed. I didn't really, if it worked, it worked. I've tried. I've had, half good, half bad. They're a beautiful flower, and I really wanted them, but they're a lot of work. Or actually just mostly a lot of patience. And so I said, well, if these come up, the ones I did last year, if these come up and, germinate, we'll take care of them and do the right thing. And so we did, and I got them bumped up, and we moved them down to the crate house, and kind of the last thing I saw of them till they went into the ground. And I think that's part of the reason that they did well, because it was sort of like I didn't fuss over them. I just said, do your best. And so I'm kind of thinking this slight neglect or, not fussing over them is the key. So anyway, we bought a ton of more of Lisianthus. I have a box of them here, and I'm going to do 3 of these mini block trays, 3, so that's 900 plants, and I've got a variety of colors. I've talked to the folks who I sell my flowers to, and they've given me some color schemes of what they're looking for this year, so that's what I got. And so typical, we have found the second or the third week in January, however they're counting it, is the best for us to start Lisianthus. We've started them way back in early December, and then when we needed to move them out, because other things were coming through, it was too cold and they froze. So that was too early, and it takes a long time for them to be ready, but they can't go out and be frozen. So we found last year that the second week worked, and I'm on the third week, which isn't huge because we had them in August and maybe late July and August for they were beautiful. They came on. They went through that really hot time period where we had temperatures in the hoop house in the 120s, we imagine. That was 116 outside. So, and they made it, through all of that. So I'm going a little bigger this year. And so what's typical is somewhere between 13 and 16 weeks before your last frost that you can start them. You don't cover them. They're tiny. And even with they're pelleted, they're a tiny little seed, so you don't want to cover them. They can get, because they take so long, they can get an algae film, and some people recommend that you put a little bit of vermiculite on them. We usually don't at the beginning. We just let them get started in germinating, and if they need a little spritz of vermiculite, or we treat them with a little bit of LAB, lactobacillus that we make, we can get that algae under control. But it's also too a case of just growing them a little on the drier side. They don't need as much water as everybody thinks. You don't want the block to dry out, but you also don't want it to be so wet and fall apart. They need to be in the house also because they need 70 to 75 degrees, and it takes about 10 to 15 days to germinate, sometimes even longer. Ours typically is about 15 days. But if you don't see anything, I wouldn't freak out. I would just, hang on there because they are slow. You just got to get used to that idea that they are slow. And once again, we use the house as a consistent worm. But once they show, their little first true leaves and stuff, then they come out here to grow on where it's a little cooler but not freezing. And they will get bumped up too, and then they'll spend the rest of their time in the crate house waiting to go into one of our hoop houses. So that kind of connection, the crate house isn't heated and the hoop houses aren't heated. It gets used to the temperature and the ambient light and all that, and it produces a really good plant to put into the ground. So that's kind of what I have, which is I have 5 trays to do today, and I'm going to have, I think, 4 more that I'm going to do that I'm not specifically going to talk about it. They're mostly things like I'm going to try a tray of pansies and another tray of poppies. And so that's where I am. And this is just the flowers. We haven't even talked about, the things that we are starting for veggies. Like I need a whole nother round of different kinds of lettuce, some more spinach, bunching onions, and I think our shelling peas are pretty close to getting started. We've got our sweet peas back here that we just planted, that were germinated from our little growing in the rings, candy rings. So they're in right there, and waiting for them to come sprouting out. And right there is the onions. So lots of things getting started. If you're following along on this and you want to, I'm doing Delphinium, Dusty Miller, and Lisianthus. And next week, if you're going to follow along and you're wanting to know what I'm going to be doing then, and if you're going to seed along with me, cool. But next week, I'm doing stock sweet dianthus. We have the dianthus that's already planted, that's the biennial, that's doing fine in all the frosty weather. The sweets are first year dianthus. These are the ones that we grow in 2 separate groups. We do one that we call the spring sweet series, which is I pick out the colors that are light, like coral and white and pinkies, and there's a light lavenderish one that I also do. And then we do the sweets in the fall, or we start them so that they would bloom in the fall, that are the dark ones, the scarlets, the black cherry, and the red, and there's more. I just can't think of them all. So dianthus is, for our florists and designers, is a real staple, and they like locally grown dianthus. And so I like to try and keep a whole time of having some dianthus. The Amazon series I do as a summer one. They fit right in. They get really tall and big during the summer. So that'll be another video. We'll talk about dianthus. But that's up next week. And then I'm going to be doing another round of snapdragons, which are mostly going to be the 2s and 2-3s. Varieties are typically like Costas, Maryland. There's some early Potomacs. Those are the ones that I'm going to be doing. So I'm also probably going to be doing everything that I haven't gotten done for this week. Plus, there's going to be more veggies. So I'm hoping that if you're enjoying these, let me know and hit the like button and give me a comment if you want down below. And I just want to say thank you so much for following along with me sitting here in the greenhouse. And I hope to see you next time. So take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.